Welcome back, dear listener. You found yourself once again in the quiet corner of the internet where history drifts softly through time, with a ticking of clocks and the hush of forgotten centuries become a lullaby. I'm your sleepy historian, and this is Boring History for Sleep, a gentle place for those who find comfort in old stories, calm narration, and the slow rhythm of the past. If falling asleep to boring history helps you rest, feel free to like this video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. And tell me, down below in the comments, where you're listening from and what time it is. There's something strangely soothing about knowing who else is out there. Eyes growing heavy, drifting towards sleep, listening to the same soft stories of forgotten worlds. So tonight, we'll step quietly into another time. A time of iron stoves and candlelight, of chimneys breathing out morning smoke, of starched aprons, polished banisters, and the endless hush of duties repeated day after day. We'll explore the life of a Victorian housemaid, one of the countless, unseen figures who kept grand homes running through the long 19th century. Beneath the surface of Victorian elegance, the gleam of silverware, the calm of afternoon tea, there was another world, one of quiet labor, creaking floorboards, and whispered hierarchies. Through this story, we won't chase drama or scandal. Instead, we'll slow down and follow the rhythm of her day. From the chill of dawn to the faint warmth of the servants' hall fire, to the stillness of night when even the gas lamps dimmed. So dim your lights. Let the faint sound of rain or your own breathing be your background music. Let the echoes of old England settle around you. And as you listen, imagine the rustle of skirts, the hush of sweeping bristles against old oak floors, the quiet persistence of lives almost lost to time. Let's begin. Before the first blush of daylight touches the high windows of the manor, the house is already stirring. In a grand Victorian household, the day begins long before the family awakens, before the clock in the hallway tolls 6, before the soft gray light seeps through the lace curtains upstairs. Down below, in the quiet belly of the house, the servants' hall hums with muted life. Imagine yourself there, deep beneath the polished drawing rooms and sleeping parlors. The air is cool and faintly scented with coal dust and lye. The flagstone floor holds the chill of the night. Somewhere, a kettle begins to whisper over the range. This is the realm of the housemaid, her world defined by routine, precision, and silence. She rises at 4:30, when the rest of the house is still folded in dreams. There is no time to linger beneath the thin woolen blanket. The fire in the servants' hall must be coaxed to life, and from that first spark, her long day begins. She dresses quickly in the dim light. Thick stockings, plain dress, apron tied neatly, hair pinned away. Her shoes echo softly as she descends the narrow stairwell leading to the basement corridor. The first task is always fire. A Victorian home cannot breathe without it. Each hearth must be cleaned and relit before the family stirs. She kneels on cold tiles, scooping away last night's ash into a tin bucket. The soot clings to her fingers and darkens her cuffs. With steady hands, she arranges new coal and kindling, coaxing the flames into quiet strength. One by one, the fireplaces awaken, spreading warmth that will later greet the household as if by magic. It is quiet work, but not lonely. In the servants' hall, other maids move like shadows. The scullery maid washing pots, the cook bustling in preparation for breakfast, the butler adjusting his cuffs before the master's morning bell. Few words are spoken. Everything follows a rhythm as old as the house itself. A dropped spoon, a creaking door, a soft cough. These are the sounds of the hidden morning. As the fires catch, the housemaid hurries upstairs again. Her candle flickers along the stairwell, casting moving light upon faded wallpaper. The family's rooms must be tidied before anyone wakes. Dusting cloth in hand, she moves through the chambers with care. Every object has its place. The brush on the vanity, the clock on the mantel, the neatly folded coverlet. She must be invisible, efficient, and quiet, leaving behind only order and freshness, never her presence. Imagine the texture of her world. The faint rasp of bristles against carpet, the subtle scent of beeswax polish, the quiet murmur of the clock as the hour creeps closer to 7. She pauses briefly to glance from a window. The garden beyond lies silver with dew, a gardener already bending among the hedges. For a moment, the beauty of it all might brush her thoughts, but only for a moment. There is always more to be done. Breakfast for the servants follows swiftly. Bread and dripping, perhaps porridge, simple fare eaten standing or in haste. The upper household will dine later, and their trays must be ready, linens pressed, china gleaming. The housemaid helps lay out the tableware, every piece aligned, every fork polished until it reflects the soft lamplight. By mid-morning, she has already walked miles within the confines of the house, stairs, corridors, landings, and attics. Her work is measured by repetition and perfection. No fingerprints on mirrors, no ash left on the grate, no creak to betray her passing. In every detail, there is discipline, a quiet pride known only to those who labor unseen. The life of a Victorian housemaid was one of constancy. The tasks never truly ended. They folded into one another, day after day. Yet there was a strange comfort in that rhythm, a sense of belonging to something greater, to a household that depended upon her steadiness. The family upstairs might never learn her name, but their comfort, their warmth, their graceful breakfasts, all began with her unacknowledged dawn. As the clock finally strikes 9, she straightens her back, wipes her hands, and breathes in the faint scent of lavender from the linen cupboard. The house above is fully awake now. Footsteps echo, voices call, bells ring. The quiet part of her day is ending. Soon, the pace will quicken, and the house will hum with the complicated dance of duties that fill each hour. But for now, just for a breath, the housemaid stands in the doorway of the servants' hall, watching the morning light spill gently down the corridor. The day stretches ahead, long and predictable, and in that predictability, there is peace, the soft rhythm of a life built upon small acts of care. As the morning settles into the steady hum of routine, the housemaid's day deepens into the unseen labor that keeps the house alive. Above her, the family moves through quiet comfort. Footsteps muffled by carpets, breakfast trays brought on gleaming silver, letters arranged neatly by the butler. But below and behind the walls, the rhythm of work continues, soft and relentless. You might imagine the great Victorian home as a kind of living organism, its servants the silent heartbeat. Every door that opens, every curtain drawn, every flicker of warmth in a cold room, all of it comes from their invisible effort. The housemaid's tasks, though small in isolation, are endless in sum. After breakfast, she turns to the bedrooms. Sheets must be stripped, linens replaced, blankets shaken out of open windows into the morning air. The smell of starch and sunlight mingles with dust and lavender. She moves methodically, folding, straightening, tucking. In her world, symmetry is not decoration. It is expectation. Every wrinkle smoothed, every cushion aligned. The eye of the mistress might never notice the perfection, but she would surely see the flaw. In wealthier houses, there were strict hierarchies even among servants. The head housemaid might oversee the work, while the junior maid performed the heavier labor, carrying coal scuttles, emptying chamber pots, cleaning boots, scrubbing stairs. Each rung of service was narrow and precise, with unspoken rules guiding conduct and duty. One did not speak to the master unless spoken to. One avoided lingering glances or idle chatter. The housemaid's presence was to be sensed, never seen. Between tasks, she might pause only for a sip of weak tea in the scullery, the room warm and fragrant with soap and steam. Around her, the other servants move like clockwork figures. The kitchen maid chops vegetables for luncheon. The footman polishes the silver until it gleams. The laundry maid, red-handed from hot water, hangs linens on ropes that crisscross the courtyard. The harmony of it all lies not in conversation, but in shared endurance. Now and then, there are moments of quiet beauty that pierce the monotony. A ray of sunlight catching the edge of a brass handle she's just polished. The faint echo of piano music drifting down from the drawing room. The distant scent of roses carried in by a draft from the conservatory. Such small things form the texture of her world. Gentle reminders that beyond the endless chores, there is still grace in the ordinary. Yet, this grace exists beside fatigue. Her hands grow raw from scrubbing. Her shoulders ache from lifting. Cold dust settles into her skin, and soap bites at the edges of her nails. There is no indulgence in comfort here. No time to rest beneath the fine linens she launders. But there is, perhaps, a quiet dignity in her perseverance. The work behind the walls is, in many ways, a mirror of the larger society that shaped it. The Victorian world was built upon layers, visible refinement resting on invisible labor. The housemaid, though confined to her station, played a vital role in maintaining the illusion of effortless gentility. Every polished banister, every gleaming teacup, every candle burning in a brass holder was, in truth, a testament to her constancy. As midday nears, the tempo shifts again. Luncheon approaches, and preparations ripple through the household. The housemaid assists where needed, fetching water, carrying trays, delivering folded napkins to the dining room. She works silently under the butler's precise direction. A misstep here, a dropped plate, a wrinkle in a tablecloth, could bring sharp words or a reprimand. And yet, even amidst the hierarchy, there are moments of quiet camaraderie. A shared glance, a half-smile exchanged between the maids as they pass in the corridor, or the comforting murmur of gossip in the servants' hall when no one else can hear. Beneath the strict formality of service lies a small, human warmth, a mutual understanding among those who dwell in the hidden half of the house. By early afternoon, the upper floors shimmer with cleanliness. The air smells faintly of polish and coal smoke. Upstairs, tea will soon be served on delicate china. Downstairs, the housemaid tidies the servants' quarters, preparing for another round of duties yet to come. Her day is far from over, but for a few brief minutes, she allows herself the rare luxury of stillness, perhaps standing near the back door, gazing at the pale sky beyond the garden wall. She has no view of the lawns or fountains that the family enjoys, but the quiet corner she knows, the cobblestone yard, the hanging linens, the potted herbs near the kitchen door, holds its own kind of peace. The wind moves gently, stirring the clean sheets as they sway. The scent of damp stone and sun-warmed fabric fills the air. It is for a fleeting moment a simple, almost sacred calm, the soft pause in the endless rhythm of work. By the time the church bell tolls 2, the housemaid's morning has already blurred into afternoon. The air within the great house feels warmer now, thick with a mingled sense of cooked meats, polish, and faint perfume from upstairs. Outside, the city or countryside beyond continues in its own rhythm. Carriages rattle by, children's laughter drifts faintly from the lane, but within these walls, time seems slower, suspended between one task and the next. The afternoon belongs to order. The earlier flurry of cleaning gives way to the subtler, quieter routines that prepare the house for the evening hours ahead. The family may be receiving visitors. Perhaps the mistress will take tea in the drawing room. For the housemaid, this means attending to the details no one should ever notice. The delicate balancing act between visibility and invisibility. She begins by checking the rooms once more. The sitting rooms must gleam under the light of tall windows, dust caught only in the air, never on the furniture. She moves her feather duster in long, careful strokes, pausing now and then to adjust a vase or smooth a curtain. The air smells faintly of beeswax and lilac water. Through the open doorway, she can hear the soft strains of a piano, each note rising and fading like ripples on still water. Imagine her in that quiet space, her footsteps muffled by thick carpet, the sunlight spilling golden patterns through lace curtains, the sound of a clock marking the steady passage of the hour. There's no haste in her movement, no clatter or rush. Her every motion is deliberate, shaped by the calm discipline that defines her life. Afterward, she may assist with sewing or mending, small repairs that sustain the illusion of perfection upstairs. Torn hems, frayed cuffs, loose buttons. All are seen in the servants' hall, beneath the soft glow of oil lamps. Her fingers move swiftly but gently, guided by habit. The fabric is often fine, muslin, silk, or wool, far removed from the coarse cotton of her own garments. She works quietly, surrounded by the rhythmic hum of domestic labor that never truly ends. Occasionally, the housemaid might be called to assist the lady's maid, fetching water, arranging garments, brushing gowns, or helping with the preparation of baths. Such moments offer a glimpse of the world she serves. Perfume bottles glinting in candlelight, lace gloves laid neatly upon a chair, the faint whisper of satin skirts. Yet she knows these things are not hers to desire. They belong to another world, one separated by invisible walls of class and expectation. In some households, the afternoon brought rare moments of respite. Perhaps a brief tea in the servants' hall, weak but warm, accompanied by simple biscuits or leftover bread. It is here that laughter sometimes returns, quietly shared between those who labor unseen. They talk in low voices about errands, whether perhaps a small kindness from the cook or a rumor from the stable boy. Even in service, life finds a way to soften its edges. Then, as the sun lowers beyond the high windows, preparations for the evening begin. Candles must be trimmed, lamps refilled with oil, coal scuttles replenished. The housemaid makes her rounds again, carrying a brass tray lined with matches and wick trimmers. The smell of oil and smoke mingles with the faint sweetness of flowers from the conservatory. She moves from room to room, lighting each space as though awakening it anew for the night to come. It's easy to forget, listening to this rhythm, that beneath it all lies exhaustion, the kind that settles deep into the body but is never voiced. There are no idle hours for reflection, no moments for leisure or reading, unless stolen late at night when others have gone to bed. The housemaid's thoughts might drift briefly, to family left behind in some distant village, to a younger sister she sends a portion of her wages to dreams of saving enough to someday open a small shop or find a modest independence. But dreaming is a quiet indulgence, best kept for the brief stillness between duties. The clang of the kitchen bell will soon call her back. There are stairs to sweep, brass to polish, shoes to clean, and fires to tend before supper. The house, though appearing tranquil to those above, is a world of perpetual motion below. By early evening, when the family gathers in comfort, reading by firelight or speaking softly over tea, the housemaid remains a silent presence, ensuring everything runs as smoothly as the ticking of the clocks she dusts each morning. She might glance upward toward the faint glow spilling down the stairwell, a reminder of the unseen world she sustains. As the last of the daylight fades, she pauses at a window near the servants' entrance. Outside, the sky has turned a dusky gray-blue. The first lamps flicker along the street, their glow reflected faintly in the polished panes. She watches for just a moment, not in longing, but in quiet acknowledgement of the life that continues beyond the house. In this world of endless service, she finds her rhythm again, steady, calm, unbroken. The day moves toward evening, and the house breathes with her. Among the countless housemaids who swept, scrubbed, and polished their way through the Victorian century, few left behind their names. They lived lives designed to blend into the background, their identities softened by duty and routine. But now and then, through an old letter, a diary, or a household ledger, a single voice reemerges, faint, steady, and human. Tonight, we'll listen for one such voice. Let's imagine her name is Mary Carter. There were many Marys in the records of service. Common, unremarkable, yet quietly vital to the story of everyday life in the 1800s. Her story is not one of rebellion or tragedy, but of endurance, the soft strength that fills the spaces history often forgets. Mary was born in a small village in Somerset around 1845, one of 6 children in a family of agricultural laborers. Her father worked in the fields, her mother took in washing when she could. Childhood, for Mary, was brief. At the age of 12, she entered service at a nearby farmhouse, sweeping floors, and carrying water for the cook. Her wages were meager, but each coin mattered, a small relief to a household where hunger was a frequent visitor. By 16, she moved to Bath, entering a larger home, the first true test of her skill and composure. Everything there felt enormous. The endless stairs, the scent of varnished oak, the formality of the butler's commands. She learned quickly to keep her head bowed, to answer softly, and to anticipate needs before they were spoken. Her uniform, a plain black dress, white apron, and starch cap, became both a symbol of duty and a quiet disguise. Mary's days followed the rhythm you've already come to know. Dawn fires, cleaning grates, polishing brass, making beds, carrying trays. Each day blurred into the next. Yet within that sameness, she found her own steady dignity, an inner stillness that allowed her to endure without complaint. She was not extraordinary, but she was consistent. And in a world that prized obedience and silence, consistency was its own kind of survival. There were small comforts, too. In the evenings, when her work was done, she might sit near the servants' hall fire, mending a stocking or reading from a borrowed Bible. Sometimes, the cook would share leftover pudding, or the footman might hum a tune from the street outside. These were moments of shared humanity, fragile, fleeting, but deeply felt. Not all her memories were soft ones. In her second year, Mary broke a porcelain pitcher, a prize piece belonging to the mistress's guest room. Though she wept with apology, the cost was deducted from her wages for 3 months. There was no anger in her account of it, just resignation. To her, mistakes were debts to be repaid through labor. Regret was a luxury she couldn't afford to dwell upon. What makes Mary's story especially vivid is a single surviving letter, dated April 1867, addressed to her younger sister. In it, she writes with steady, looping script. The house is large and cold in the mornings. The windows freeze, and I must breathe on the glass to see the garden. The mistress is kind in manner, though not in speech. I have grown used to the bells that ring for us below. It is strange to think the family cannot see how much we do for them, but I am content enough, for I am not idle. In those simple words, we glimpse something profound, the quiet pride of a woman who found meaning not in recognition, but in reliability. She doesn't speak of anger or longing, only the small satisfaction of being needed, of belonging to a rhythm larger than herself. Over the years, Mary moved from one household to another, first as a junior maid, later as a housemaid of higher rank. Her wages rose modestly, her hands grew rougher, and her back stiffer. By 30, she was considered experienced, the kind of servant trusted to train others, to manage routines when the mistress was away. When she finally left service in her 40s, she took a position as a caretaker for a local vicarage, tending the church, dusting pews, maintaining the rectory garden. It was quieter work, and by then, her body had grown accustomed to the rhythm of care. She lived alone in a small room above the vestry, surrounded by the smell of old wood and hymn books. There, in her final years, she found peace in familiarity. Mary Carter's life was not written in grand history books, but it lingers in the margins. A single line in a census, a faint note in a parish record, a letter folded carefully in a drawer. Through her, we glimpse the vast, unseen world of ordinary women whose days were shaped by work, whose comfort came not from luxury, but from constancy. Imagine her, one final time, an older woman with calloused hands, standing in the quiet of a church as the afternoon light filters through stained glass. Dust motes drift like golden snow. She rests her broom, listening to the faint echo of distant bells. The rhythm of her life, so steady and unbroken, continues even in silence. In that stillness, the story of Mary Carter, and of countless women like her, finds its quiet dignity once again. Imagine, for a moment, the great Victorian house itself, vast, intricate, and alive in its own way. It rises from the earth like a living map of class and purpose. Elegant rooms above, hidden corridors below. Every corner has a rhythm, every floor a story. And through all of it moves the quiet figure of the housemaid, her steps tracing invisible paths from basement to attic. This was Mary Carter's domain. Not the drawing rooms or parlors where she was forbidden to linger, but the narrow staircases, the servants' passages, the hidden doors that connected every unseen space. Few guests ever glimpsed these corridors. They ran behind walls and under floors, allowing the household staff to move like whispers through the body of the house. The grand illusion of effortless comfort upstairs depended entirely on the unseen labor moving quietly beneath. Mary would begin her rounds after breakfast and continue until dusk. She knew every board that creaked, every latch that stuck, every draft that crept through the cracks in old stone walls. The house was her world, not in ownership, but in intimacy. She knew its moods, the sound it made before rain, the way dust settled differently in summer than in winter, the way certain windows caught the light just so in late afternoon. Through her eyes, we can explore this world from the ground up. In the kitchen, the air hums with heat and the metallic rhythm of pots and knives. The scullery maid scrubs endlessly, her hands reddened by soap. The cook, commanding yet weary, tends to roasts and puddings, measuring time not by clocks but by scent and instinct. The butler inspects everything before it departs the room, and the housemaid, our steady observer, moves between them, carrying messages, fetching coal, returning cleaned linens to the shelves. Up the narrow back stairs she climbs, careful always to step softly. The walls here are plain plaster, chipped and faded, unlike the ornate wallpaper of the family staircases. A servant's candle sits in a small bracket on the wall, its flame bending in the draft. The air grows cooler as she reaches the second floor. Here, she must move with stillness. Every sound carries. In the guest rooms, she tidies, folds, and smooths, tasks done so thoroughly they vanish into silence. She knows the subtle language of order, how a pillow crease should face the door, how to fold a blanket so its edge catches the light evenly. Each motion is a meditation in precision. When a bell rings, she listens for its note. Each bell in the servant hall is labeled by room. The dining room has a low, resonant tone. The mistress's bedroom, a lighter chime. She hurries to answer, careful never to appear breathless when she enters. A request for fresh water, a missing glove, a fallen pin, small matters, but to serve promptly is to prove one's worth. By midday, she's traversed the house a dozen times, stairs, hallways, and courtyards forming a network only she fully understands. The upstairs maids and footmen cross paths like stars in orbit, each moving with deliberate quiet. The household seems calm, but below the surface it functions like a silent machine, its rhythm guided by habit and hierarchy. The housemaid's duties also carried her into spaces rarely seen even by the family. The attics, where trunks of old clothing and forgotten furniture rested beneath dust and cobwebs. The basement corridors, where coal bins lined the walls and pipes hummed faintly with the pulse of water. These were the lungs and veins of the household, hidden, essential, unacknowledged. In those quiet places, away from supervision, Mary might allow her thoughts to wander. She might pause by a high window in the attic to look out across the rooftops, or stand in the shadowed larder breathing in the cool air scented faintly of salt and stone. The house, though demanding, was also her companion, constant, familiar, even comforting in its predictability. Occasionally, she would witness the subtle tensions between upstairs and downstairs, a misplaced item causing frustration, a misunderstood instruction traveling down the chain of command. But rarely did she speak of such things. Her silence was both shield and skill. In a world where words could cause trouble, silence became its own form of wisdom. As the day lengthened, the rhythm of her work slowed. The family might be out visiting, the mistress occupied with correspondence. For a few quiet minutes, the house seemed to breathe, the ticking clocks louder, the fire crackling softly in distant rooms. It was in these moments, when stillness returned, that the housemaid's life became almost contemplative. She might pause in a dim corridor, hands resting lightly on the railing, and listen to the layered hum of the house, the faint murmur of voices below, the sigh of wind through a half-open window. It is easy to imagine her thoughts drifting, not in bitterness or longing, but in gentle curiosity about the world beyond the gate, the markets, the parks, the carriages she glimpses but never rides. The servant's journey through the great house was more than physical. It was also a movement through social space. She navigated boundaries invisible but absolute, existing between worlds yet belonging fully to neither. And still, she moved gracefully within them, day after day, leaving no trace but polished floors and the faint scent of soap. The house might have belonged to others, but its heartbeat was hers. As twilight gathered over the rooftops, the grand Victorian house softened into stillness. Lamps glowed behind heavy curtains, and the air in the corridors thickened with quiet. For the housemaid, this was not yet rest. It was the second movement of her day, gentler in pace but demanding in precision. Imagine her now, carrying a small oil lamp as she moves through dim rooms, turning down beds, drawing drapes against the cooling night. The polished brass catches faint glimmers of light, and her reflection drifts ghost-like across the surfaces she's cleaned so many times. The house seems to exhale after its long day, its murmurs settling into hush. The evening routine was a ritual of preparation, a kind of nightly unmaking. Where morning meant brightness and readiness, evening meant retreat. The fire must be tended so that only embers remain. The water jugs filled and set carefully upon washstands. The bed linens smoothed to a calm perfection. Downstairs, the kitchen fire burned low, casting a faint red glow over the scullery walls. The last plates were dried and stacked. The faint smell of bread and tallow lingered in the air, mingling with the cool scent of damp stone. From the servants' hall came the subdued rustle of chairs being pushed back. A few soft voices exchanged before silence reclaimed the space. For Mary, this was the time she found most peaceful. The day's sharp edges had softened. Her steps were slower, her movements quieter still. The ticking of a distant clock became the pulse of the house. Sometimes she would pause to listen, not for instruction, but for comfort, the kind of listening that came from familiarity, from years of knowing exactly how a place should sound when it is at peace. Occasionally, the mistress might call for her once more, a final errand before rest. A shawl retrieved, a candle trimmed, a small kindness attended to in silence. There was no complaint in the housemaid's demeanor, only a subdued acceptance, the rhythm of duty long practiced until it became a kind of meditation. When her tasks were complete, she descended once more into the servants' quarters. The air here was cooler, touched by the faint scent of coal and wax polish. In her small room, shared with another maid, a single candle burned beside a narrow bed. The mattress was thin, the sheets coarse, yet there was comfort in their familiarity. Her hands were rough, her back ached faintly, but there was a quiet satisfaction in the simple act of sitting still. She might glance at a small keepsake, a pressed flower from her village, a letter folded and refolded, the edges soft from touch. These fragments of another life connected her to the world beyond the house, the world she rarely saw but never fully forgot. As she lay down, the distant ticking of clocks and faint creaking of timbers lulled her toward rest. The sounds of the house became almost like breathing, the settling of wood, the faint whistle of the wind along the roof. To those unaccustomed, the noise might seem eerie. To her, it was a lullaby. There was in these hours a curious sense of contentment. The repetition, the order, the structure, all of it gave meaning to her days. In a world defined by hierarchy and restraint, the small victories mattered. A task well done, a kind word from the cook, a rare half hour to herself. Outside the servants' entrance, the night deepened. The air was cool and faintly misted, carrying the smell of rain on stone. Somewhere, a horse-drawn cab clattered faintly on the distant street, the sound fading into the hush. The stars above London were faint and filtered by smoke, but they were there, and perhaps as she glanced up at them once before closing her eyes, she thought of the same stars above her childhood home. In sleep, she might dream of fields rather than staircases, of open air instead of the musty scent of corridors. Yet even in dreams, her world remained shaped by rhythm, by the patterns of service and stillness, by the balance between exhaustion and calm. The life of a Victorian housemaid was not one of wealth or leisure, yet it possessed its own form of poetry, a quiet endurance, a dignity born from the mastery of daily ritual. Beneath the endless repetition lay an unspoken truth, that her labor was the invisible framework upon which the beauty of the house depended. While others drifted through rooms adorned with velvet and silver, her hands kept those same rooms alive, sweeping, scrubbing, setting, restoring. Her touch was everywhere, though unseen. Her presence felt in the stillness she left behind. And so, as night settled fully and the last lamp was dimmed, the great house slept, but not before the servant had ensured its comfort. Only then did she allow herself the same luxury. Imagine her drifting to sleep, her breath slowing, her body heavy with the gentle ache of work completed. The house rests, the world quiets, and another day slips quietly into history. The great Victorian house, by day alive with quiet movement and whispered instruction, becomes at night something entirely different. In the stillness, when the last embers die and even the clock seem to hesitate between ticks, the house feels ancient, older than its brick or mortar, older than its family name. Imagine yourself walking through it after midnight. The corridors are cool, the air dense with the scent of beeswax and thyme. Shadows stretch long across the flagstones, and every sound, the groan of wood, the drip of a pipe, seems magnified. Beneath the polished floors lies another world, a world of passageways, storage vaults, and stories that never made their way into ledgers or letters. These were the unseen layers of the Victorian household, the realm of the forgotten and the hidden. Here, archaeologists of later centuries would uncover fragments of that secret life. A broken porcelain button, a child's marble, a scrap of fabric fallen through a floorboard. Objects too small to be noticed in their own time, yet powerful enough to tell entire histories. If you were to peel back the surface of a 19th century manor, you'd find a palimpsest, traces of countless lives lived beneath the veneer of propriety. Beneath hearthstones, builders sometimes discovered handwritten charms, small folded papers inscribed with prayers or protective symbols, left by servants or craftsmen to keep misfortune away. Others found shoes sealed behind walls, believed to ward off spirits. The Victorians, for all their fascination with progress and science, were deeply superstitious in private. For the housemaid, this world of quiet superstition blended seamlessly into daily life. She might tuck a small charm beneath her pillow or whisper a prayer before entering the attic at dusk. When one spends every hour in silence, surrounded by creaks and drafts, it's easy to feel that the house itself is listening. Archaeologists in our own time have uncovered such traces from the servants' quarters of old English estates. Clay pipes, thimbles, discarded buttons, tiny perfume bottles half filled with residue. Each object is a whisper of routine, the tangible echo of a forgotten life. A simple hairpin might tell of a girl who rose before dawn, brushed her hair by candlelight, and left the pin behind one hurried morning more than a century ago. Even more revealing are the letters and ledgers tucked into floor cavities or buried in garden soil. Some contain shopping lists or household accounts. Others, fragments of writing practice or discarded notes never meant to be read again. Through them, historians glimpse the rhythms of life that never entered the official record. The private exchanges, the lost emotions, the quiet resilience. To the Victorians, the grand house represented stability, order, and permanence. But like all human creations, it was layered with imperfection, patched, mended, and adapted across generations. Beneath the gilt and polish lay beams worn by countless feet, walls stuffed with discarded rags to keep out the cold, and spaces where time itself seemed to settle. The hidden corners of these houses also held the remnants of past lives. The faint mark of a child's drawing behind plaster, initials carved on a beam by a bored apprentice, a forgotten toy lodged between floorboards. Each one a small rebellion against invisibility, each one a moment preserved not by intention, but by accident. For the modern historian or archaeologist, such discoveries are not just curiosities. They are acts of quiet resurrection, the revival of lives once considered too ordinary to record. They remind us that history is not built solely upon the names of the wealthy or powerful, but upon the countless unseen hands that sustain them. If you close your eyes, you might imagine standing in such a hidden space now. The air cool, the floor beneath uneven. A faint glimmer of light seeps through a crack above. You kneel, brushing away a thin layer of dust to reveal something small, a metal thimble, perhaps dulled by time. The object feels strangely warm from your touch, as though memory itself clings to it. This is what history often forgets, the intimate, the minute, the almost invisible. Yet it is here that the past feels most alive. Every mark, every trace is a whisper that says someone was here. Someone cared enough to leave a piece of themselves behind. And so, as we imagine these buried fragments, charms against bad luck, tools of labor, scraps of writing, we begin to sense the human pulse that beats beneath centuries of dust. The lives of servants, artisans, and children are not lost. They merely rest, waiting beneath the floorboards of time. The house itself, silent and dignified, keeps their stories in its bones. In the stillness of forgotten rooms and sealed cupboards, the past lingers like a soft echo. The stories of those who lived and worked within the grand Victorian houses rarely found their way into history books. Yet, sometimes their voices return, faint, fragmented, carried on letters, diaries, and oral traditions that escape the fate of being discarded. Imagine unfolding a yellowed piece of paper, edges brittle, the ink faded to sepia. The handwriting is careful, yet hurried, the sort of penmanship learned by those who practice by candlelight after long hours of labor. The letter might begin simply, "Dearest Mother, I am well, though the work is heavy." Such letters, discovered decades or even centuries later, allow us to hear the rhythm of ordinary lives. They speak of wages and weather, of aching hands, of kindnesses from fellow servants, of loneliness soothed by small rituals, a cup of tea before bed, a hymn softly hummed in the dark. They remind us that history, when stripped of grandeur, is made of small and tender things. Some of these voices belong to young girls who came to service barely into their teens. They wrote of missing home, of mastering the art of silence, of learning to read the moods of those above them. Others, older and more accustomed to their station, wrote with quiet pragmatism. "It is steady work," one noted in a recovered notebook, "and though it tires me, it is better than the factory." These documents, though few, open a window into the private world beneath the surface of the Victorian ideal. They reveal that the house, for all its elegance, was a place of constant negotiation between obedience and self-respect, between exhaustion and dignity. Historians have also uncovered servant testimonies recorded in later years, when those once bound by silence finally spoke freely. Some recalled the warmth of companionship among the staff, the laughter shared over laundry tubs, the whispered jokes passed in hallways. Others remembered the long winters when coal was scarce, and the chill crept into every seam of clothing. Through these recollections, the house transforms from a mere setting into a living organism of memory. Every corridor becomes a thread connecting the voices of the past. When one reads their words aloud, one can almost hear footsteps on stone once more, the faint ring of a bell, the rustle of skirts in a still room. Archaeological discoveries often mirror these written traces. In one estate, a small wooden box was found beneath a hearthstone, containing a few coins, a scrap of lace, and a folded note bearing a single name, perhaps a token of remembrance, perhaps a charm. In another, the initials of servants were found carved discreetly into a beam behind the scullery door, a gesture both rebellious and enduring. Even objects not meant to last tell stories of quiet resilience. A cracked teacup repaired with iron staples. A needle case smoothed by years of use. A simple hand mirror, its silvering gone, reflecting nothing but soft light. In each of these items, one can sense the persistence of humanity, the desire to be seen, even when unseen. When we listen closely to these unearthed voices, the distinction between upstairs and downstairs begins to blur. The same longing for peace, for security, for meaning, threads through every life within the walls. The difference lay only in how those longings were permitted to be expressed. Imagine standing now in a silent room, once filled with the hum of activity. The wallpaper is faded, the air faintly scented with age. You can almost hear the whispers of those who lived here, not ghosts in the spectral sense, but echoes of memory. Their laughter, their sighs, their whispered hopes remain imprinted in the grain of the wood and the folds of fabric. Perhaps that is why these houses hold such quiet power. They are not merely structures of brick and plaster, but repositories of emotion, patience, endurance. Each forgotten servant's name, rediscovered through a letter or artifact, adds a small spark of life back into the dim corners of history. And as we read their words, we become their listeners, carrying forward the rhythm of their days, the hush of their nights. We remember that even in anonymity, they shaped the texture of the world we inherited. History, after all, is not a distant story. It is a long conversation. And sometimes, if we listen gently enough, we can still hear the servants' voices murmuring softly beneath the floorboards of time. Every old house holds its share of stories, though not all of them belong to the living. In Victorian times, superstition was as common as soot. Beneath the polished civility of drawing rooms and parlors, many believed that spirits walked the same halls, that every creak or whisper of wind carried a trace of those who came before. For the housemaid, such beliefs were not dismissed as childish fancy. Long nights and quiet corridors left much room for thought and imagination. There were tales whispered among servants of footsteps heard when no one walked, of candles flickering though no draught could be found. Yet even in fear, there was a strange comfort in believing that the past lingered nearby, that those who once lived within the walls never truly departed. Some Victorian households even encouraged this quiet reverence for memory. It was an age obsessed with death, yet also with remembrance. Locks of hair were kept in lockets, photographs of the deceased arranged lovingly in albums, and mourning rituals could last months or years. The line between life and afterlife was not sharp. It was a mist into which one could gaze and still feel connected. Imagine the housemaid ascending the narrow stairs late at night, her candle flickering as she passes portraits of long-gone ancestors. The painted eyes seem almost to follow her, gleaming faintly in the half-light. The floorboards groan beneath her feet, old wood shifting, or perhaps something older still. Yet she does not rush. Her pace remains steady, deliberate. The living and the dead both have their place in the house, and she has long learned not to disturb either. There were stories told among servants about certain rooms, ones that were always colder than the rest, or doors that refused to stay shut. In one grand estate, it was said that the scullery was haunted by the memory of a maid who perished in service, her presence marked only by the faint scent of lavender. In another, the echo of a bell would sound from a wall long after its rope had been removed. These were not frightening tales so much as gentle affirmations that the past remained part of the present. Archaeologists, when studying such houses, often remark on how the physical environment itself preserves emotion. Layers of paint covering initials, soot on a hearthstone worn smooth by countless hands, the lingering scent of polish and dust, each one a residue of existence. In this way, the ghosts of routine are not truly supernatural. They are imprints of repetition, of human persistence over time. If one stands in a derelict manner today, long abandoned, the stillness carries that same sense of presence. The sunlight slants through cracked shutters, catching the shimmer of dust in the air. The smell of old linen and faint mildew mingles with something else, an almost tangible memory of order and quiet purpose. You can almost imagine the faint rhythm of footsteps, the rustle of skirts, the low murmur of voices beneath the hum of history. For the housemaid, routine was not only survival. It was a way of grounding herself in an uncertain world. Each repeated task, each careful gesture, created a rhythm that bound her to something larger, a structure, a purpose, a pattern. In that pattern lay security. And even when she left, others would follow the same motions, repeating them until the gestures themselves became the house's memory. It is in this sense that ghosts and routines are intertwined. Every time we clean, repair, or preserve an old house, we repeat the motions of those who came before us. Their work continues through our hands, quietly, endlessly. History is not a succession of vanished lives, but a chain of gestures linking one century to another. Even now, when restorers uncover old servant passages or dust-filled attics, they often remark on the strange calm that fills these spaces. It is as if the air itself remembers discipline and care. The faint traces of polish on a door handle, the order of tools left in a workshop, the careful placement of folded linens. These are the true ghosts of the Victorian age, not specters in the dark, but echoes of precision and patience. And when modern visitors wander these preserved homes, they step unconsciously into the rhythm of that old routine. Their footsteps match the same pattern. Their breath catches in the same stillness. For a brief moment, the living and the dead share the same space, bound not by fear, but by familiarity. The ghosts of routine are gentle companions. They do not frighten, they remind. They whisper that time, no matter how far it stretches, never entirely erases care. Somewhere in every well-kept room, in every quiet corner, the memory of diligence still lingers, soft, persistent, and endlessly patient. In every grand Victorian home, there existed not one world, but two, separated by no more than a flight of stairs, yet divided by centuries of class and custom. Upstairs lived the masters and mistresses, surrounded by portraits, parlors, and polished silver. Downstairs toiled the servants, enclosed within narrow halls, lit by oil lamps and the hum of work that never ceased. Together, these two realms formed a single heartbeat, one visible, one hidden. From the outside, a country manor appeared whole, serene, symmetrical, but step through the servants' entrance, and the illusion fractured. There, the air smelled of soap, starch, and coal smoke. The sounds were sharper, the clang of pots, the hiss of steam, the quick shuffle of shoes across stone. It was a parallel existence, one that supported the splendor above, but was rarely acknowledged. The architecture itself enforced this divide. Servant staircases were deliberately narrow, steep, and tucked out of sight, twisting through the house like secret arteries. They connected every level but allowed no lingering. The staff moved silently, appearing and vanishing as though invisible. To be a good servant was to be unseen. Their world existed in shadows, below, behind, and beneath. A butler's pantry might sit mere feet from a gilded dining room, yet it belonged to another universe entirely. In that small chamber, a man in plain black attire polished silver until it gleamed like moonlight, listening faintly to laughter rising from beyond the door. The distance between his life and theirs was measured not in miles, but in silence. The upstairs world thrived on order and display. Velvet curtains, marble mantels, perfumed guests. Every detail arranged for the illusion of ease. It was downstairs that the machinery of comfort truly turned. Housemaids rose before dawn to light fires in cold grates. Kitchen maids scrubbed the floors until their hands grew raw. Scullery maids worked in air thick with steam and soap. By the time the first breakfast tray ascended the stairs, half a dozen women had already labored for hours. And still, there was dignity in this rhythm. Among the servants, hierarchy ruled as strictly as above, from the butler and housekeeper at the top to the scullery maid at the bottom. The smallest duties held meaning, for they contributed to something greater than themselves. Even the act of folding linen, done with precision, was a form of pride, a quiet declaration of worth within invisible walls. The language of class extended to every sound and gesture. The master's footsteps were slow, deliberate, the servants brisk and purposeful. The ticking of the hallway clock marked time differently for each, leisure for one, labor for the other. Even the light changed character. Upstairs, it was softened by chandeliers. Downstairs, it flickered from oil lamps against stone. And yet, despite this division, the two worlds were bound by necessity. The family depended entirely on the staff's skill and discretion, while the servants relied on their employment for survival. The relationship was both intimate and impersonal, a form of coexistence shaped by duty rather than affection. A housemaid might know every detail of her mistress's habits, the scent she favored, the hour she rose, yet never be granted a single word of true familiarity. In many homes, bells bridged the distance, each room fitted with a pull cord that rang in the servants' hall. The sound of those bells ruled their lives. Breakfast bell, tea bell, dressing bell, dinner bell. Each chime summoned movement. Each note signaled an invisible command. To ignore a bell was unthinkable. To anticipate it, the mark of excellence. For the servants, time itself belonged to others. Their hours were shaped by someone else's appetite, leisure, or whim. Yet within that constraint, small freedoms bloomed. Shared jokes in the scullery, songs whispered during laundry, glances exchanged over supper in the servants' hall. These were the quiet rebellions of ordinary endurance. There was irony in this division, too. The very people who sustained the household's elegance were denied participation in it. They washed the gowns they could never wear, polished the silver they could never touch at table, and prepared banquets whose taste they would never know. And still, they found satisfaction in the smooth running of the home. For to maintain perfection, unseen, was a kind of art. Modern historians often describe this system as one of dependency, but there was more to it than that. It was a living structure, harsh, yes, but intricately human. Each person, from the cook to the footman, played a role that gave the house its pulse. Without them, the entire illusion of aristocratic grace would have collapsed in a day. To stand today in an old manor and walk from a servant's hall to the drawing room is to cross a border between two histories. One glittered under chandeliers, the other sweated beneath low ceilings. Yet together, they formed a single story, the visible and the unseen, the elegant and the exhausted. The true life of the Victorian house was not upstairs or downstairs, but in the constant motion between the two. In the grand choreography of the Victorian household, language was more than speech. It was structure, order, and identity. The way one spoke, the words one used, and even the silences between them formed an invisible code that bound the household together. For a servant, mastery of this quiet language was as essential as skill with a broom or tray. It began with address. No servant ever spoke to the mistress or master by name. Madam, sir, my lady, titles became armor, symbols of distance. A servant's name, too, could be replaced. In some homes, all housemaids were called by the same convenient name, perhaps Mary or Sarah, to spare the mistress from remembering individual identities. To lose one's name was not an insult, exactly. It was part of becoming part of the house itself, as if one were another piece of furniture polished into silence. Politeness was not warmth, and warmth was rarely permitted. Servants spoke when spoken to, moved quietly, and disappeared quickly. In this world, silence was respect, and presence was to be managed carefully. A good servant seemed to glide, always there, yet never interrupting the air around them. Orders, too, were coded. A request phrased gently, such as, "The fire seems to have gone out," was no observation. It was a command. "We seem to be out of tea. Mint, fetch more at once." Every tone carried its own implication, and misunderstanding that tone could end a position. But the language of service also existed below stairs, among the servants themselves. It was livelier, more human, filled with humor, shorthand, and secret gestures. A raised eyebrow from the cook might mean the mistress was in a temper. A subtle cough from the footman could warn that the master had entered the hall. In these small exchanges, the staff created their own shared world, a language of survival within constraint. The rhythm of communication followed the rhythm of the day. Morning greetings were murmured over polishing tables. Afternoon chatter hummed through the laundry, and by supper time, voices rose in gentle fatigue, softened by candlelight and the steady comfort of routine. After hours of moving unseen, the servants' hall became a space where words were allowed to breathe. Yet even there, hierarchy persisted. The butler and housekeeper presided at the head of the long table. Conversation paused when they spoke, and laughter, while permitted, had to be discreet. It was a community defined by boundaries. Every gesture, every word, shaped by unspoken rules. Letters were another form of quiet language, carrying emotions that the day's formality suppressed. A maid might write to her family back home, describing her days in careful detail, the grandeur of the house, the endless cleaning, the kindness or coldness of her employers. She would never complain too openly, for letters might be read by others, but her tone would betray exhaustion, pride, or longing between the lines. Many letters from servants that survive today are astonishing in their restraint, humble, observant, never bitter, as though they knew history might one day read over their shoulders. The butler's voice carried particular weight within this linguistic world. He spoke with precision, each word measured, deliberate. He gave instructions in tones soft yet unyielding, ensuring the house ran with the quiet efficiency expected by those above. His calmness was authority, his politeness command. To the younger maids and footmen, his approval or disapproval could make or unmake their standing. And above them all, the housekeeper's voice was the true melody of the home. She kept the accounts, managed the linen, trained the girls, and ensured the household's moral rhythm. When she spoke, even the most restless maid listened. Her words could soothe or sharpen, but they always carried a weight, the weight of someone who understood both the rules of the house and the hearts that labored within it. Outside the house, speech revealed class instantly. A misplaced word, an accent too broad, a turn of phrase too bold, all could betray one's origins. Servants who rose through the ranks often learned to speak in refined tones, their voices soft and measured, stripped of regional edges. To speak properly was to survive. Still, language flowed both ways. The gentry often picked up expressions from their servants without realizing it. Small turns of phrase that traveled upward from the kitchens into parlors, subtly reshaping polite speech. In that way, the language of service was never static. It drifted, evolved, and intertwined, just as the lives upstairs and downstairs did, bound by necessity and the shared air of the same house. There were moments, rare and fleeting, when speech transcended hierarchy altogether. Perhaps a mistress, alone in her room, might thank a maid sincerely for her care during an illness. Or a butler, long in service, might be asked to offer advice on some household matter beyond his usual duties. These moments were like cracks in the rigid surface, brief glimpses of humanity across the divide. Even today, when we read the diaries of employers or the letters of maids, we hear this dual language echoing, the formal words and the quiet meanings beneath them. She was a good girl, might mean she never questioned me. The house ran smoothly, might mean no one dared to slow down. Between each polite line lies the hum of labor, endurance, and unspoken understanding. The Victorian household, in all its order, was a place where silence could be as eloquent as speech. Every word, every pause carried intention. It was a world where communication itself was service, polished, precise, and perpetually poised on the edge between obedience and dignity. By the closing years of the 19th century, The great rhythm of the servant's world, the measured steps, the chiming bells, the quiet obedience began to fade. Change crept in slowly at first, like dawn light spilling through curtains after a long night. The industrial age, with all its noise and invention, was reshaping Britain, and with it, the delicate machinery of the grand Victorian household began to unwind. Railways brought goods, letters, and people faster than ever before. The middle class swelled, fortunes shifted, old estates found their wealth draining away. The rigid order of upstairs and downstairs no longer seemed inevitable, though few at the time could imagine life without it. Servants who once might have spent a lifetime in one household now looked to the growing cities, to factories, shops, and offices where the pay was modest but the hours their own. Those who remained loyal to domestic service noticed the change immediately. Young girls no longer sought positions as eagerly as before. The long days, strict manners, and constant labor seemed increasingly outdated in a world moving toward modernity. A housemaid might look at the smoky train line crossing the horizon and think of freedom, of wages she could spend as she wished, of rooms where she need not bow her head to anyone. The homes themselves began to shift, too. Electric lights replaced oil lamps, rendering the task of trimming wicks obsolete. Plumbing crept into even modest houses, reducing the need for water fetching and basin cleaning. The invention of new appliances, the vacuum, the gas stove, the washing machine, slowly dismantled the endless cycles of manual toil. The once essential skills of the scullery and pantry began to lose their purpose. For many upper-class families, the disappearance of servants felt like the loss of tradition itself. Diaries from the time reveal laments about the difficulty of finding good help, about the impertinence of modern girls who would rather work in shops than serve in respectable homes. What these writers often failed to see was that the world was changing beneath their feet, and that the silence of the servants' hall was not just quiet, but emptying. The remaining staff found themselves taking on more work for less recognition. A single maid might now perform the duties of two. The grand domestic hierarchies thinned, and the comforting regularity of bell calls, meal times, and daily inspections began to blur. Yet still, the rituals persisted where they could. Beds were made, fires lit, and trays carried with steady hands, even as the sense of permanence dissolved like morning mist. The First World War would complete what industrial progress had begun. Many young men who once served as footmen or grooms were drawn into military service and never returned. Women filled new roles: nurses, clerks, factory workers, finding independence they would not surrender afterward. By the 1920s, the great houses stood quieter, some shuttered entirely, others running on skeleton staffs. And yet, nostalgia lingered. In some country estates, mistresses continued to set their tables with silver polish to a mirror's gleam, holding dinner parties beneath chandeliers, even as drafts crept through empty corridors. The echo of footsteps on marble replaced the chorus of labor that once filled the halls. The rhythm of the house slowed, and the distinction between upstairs and downstairs began to blur, fading into history. Still, in that fading world, a certain beauty remained. The beauty of care, precision, and devotion to craft. The housemaid who folded sheets with perfect corners, the cook who seasoned by instinct, the butler who placed a glass so it caught the candlelight just right. They preserved something timeless, the dignity of doing things well, even when no one would see. To imagine the end of the Victorian household is to imagine twilight falling over a grand estate. Windows glowing faintly, smoke curling from the last chimney, a single maid closing shutters for the night. Somewhere upstairs, the remnants of a dinner party wind down. Somewhere below, the last embers are swept from the hearth. The great structure, once alive with movement, settles into stillness. For historians, this moment marks the passing of an entire social order, the quiet collapse of centuries of service and privilege. But for those who lived it, it was simpler and sadder, a way of life slipping away, unnoticed, as modernity replaced tradition with efficiency. The bells stopped ringing not with drama, but with a gentle, final silence. And in that silence, something human endures. The care, the rhythm, the patience, these remain part of our collective memory. Every neatly set table, every folded towel, every thoughtful gesture carries a trace of that vanished world. The servants may have disappeared, but the idea of quiet service, of tending to life with devotion and calm, has never truly left us. In that sense, the Victorian household never entirely died. It simply transformed, its values diluted, its rituals scattered, but its spirit lingering in small, unseen acts of care. Like the glow of embers beneath cooling ash, the memory still warms the imagination. And now, as the house grows quiet once more, we leave behind the faint footsteps of the Victorian servants, the unseen hands that shaped an age. The fires have dimmed, the corridors have cooled, and the rhythm of work and whisper has faded into stillness. Yet somewhere, in the corners of memory, their presence lingers, soft as dust in morning light. You might imagine it now, in your mind's quiet. The sound of polished shoes on stone, the clink of teacups in a pantry, the gentle murmur of distant conversation. All of it happening beneath the grand ceilings of a world that has long since vanished. The housemaid straightens one last pillow. The butler checks the lock upon the door. The lamps are turned low, one by one, until only the faintest glow remains. It's strange to think how many lives unfolded entirely within those walls. How the rhythm of waking, working, and resting became its own kind of eternity. And though the houses stand empty now, their histories remain alive in every beam and stair. Quiet witnesses to the endless choreography of service and silence. In these echoes, there's something comforting, a sense that time may pass, but human care endures, that even in the smallest acts of order and attention, something of beauty survives. The neat fold of a sheet, the shine of clean brass, the soft closing of a door at night, all are gestures that whisper of continuity. And so, as you rest now, you might feel that same rhythm settling into stillness. The steady breath of sleep drawing closer. The hum of the past softening into the quiet of your own room. The world, above and below, becoming one. If this gentle journey through boring history for sleep has brought you peace, perhaps you'll let it linger a little longer. If these softly spoken stories help you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you calm. And in the comments, you might share where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. It's strangely comforting to imagine others in other rooms, drifting off to the same quiet tales. So dim the lights. Let the echoes fade. Let the house of memory close its doors for the night. The world outside grows softer, slower, simpler. And you, dear listener, can rest now. Let the stories of those long gone keep watch a little longer, as you drift into dreams where footsteps echo faintly under old wooden floors. Good night from the sleepy historian.